So, hi. Um, I chose Blazing Saddles, uh, which is Mel Brooks. And if any of you guys seen Mel Brooks before, um, he's pretty funny and he likes to make something serious into almost a joke, just to kind of get the point across. Um, in this particular movie, he plays the Indian chief and governor. I'm going to mispronounce this. Uh, he put May or some put May or something like that. He's also the director, screenwriter. He did a majority of the lyrics. He was born June 28th in 1926. His father died when he was 2 from tuberculosis. And according to him, he uses jokes and plays the drums to deal with that anger and loss. He was in World War II, near the end of it, and apparently at the battle of one of the battles, he removed landmines. Afterwards, he went into comedy and finally started doing TV in 1949. Some of his notable achievements he is one of the 16 people that are part of the Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony Club, and that's actually a really big deal. He has the 41st life, uh, basically Lifetime Achievement Award. He was a Kennedy Center honoree, which Obama told him not to stand him up, because Mel Brooks is always entertaining. And he has a star on the Hollywood Boulevard. Um, he's also done The Producers, Spaceballs, Young Frankenstein, or if you pay attention to earlier in the film, it's Frankenstein. Um, and Robin Hood Men in Tights, High Anxiety, History of the World Part 1, and Dracula Dead and Loving It. He often appears somewhere in his films. At least 3 of these I know he appears in, including this one. Supposedly he was somewhere in Young Frankenstein, but this is also a similar trait that you see with Alfred Hitchcock. I found a quote that I thought was funny. Uh, he said, I cut my finger. That's a tragedy. A man walks into an open sewer and dies. That's comedy. Um, then we get into our main character, Bart, who was Cleveland Little. He was born June 1st, 1939, and died October 22nd, 1992 from colon cancer. In the 70s, he actually won a Tony for Best Actor, and at one point, he got a Drama Desk Award for Outstanding Actor, and that was for Pearly, which is a play. He won basically the British equivalent to an Oscar, or at least he was a nomination. He actually lost that most promising newcomer to leading films roles to Georgia Howe. He has a bachelor's in dramatic arts from San Diego State, and he had studied at the American Academy for Dramatic Arts. He has a star on the Walk of Fame as well. Most of his were Broadway shows or off Broadway, like Pearly, Narrow Road to the Deep North, All Over Town, and I'm Not a Reportee, I believe it's pronounced. Um, then we have Gene Wilder's character, Jim the Wanko Kid. He was born June 11th, 1933, named Jeremiah Silberman, and died August 29th, 2016 from Alzheimer's disease. He has the Bachelor's of Arts from University of Ohio, or Iowa. Sorry about that. Um, and this is a stage name, which some actors actually do choose. Um, he chose it because he loved Thornton Wilder's play Our Town, and supposedly he just chose Gene just because, but some people do believe it may have done something with his mother, Jeannie. Um, he also worked often with Mel Brooks and Richard Pryor. If you have $50,000 after August, you can nominate him for a star on the Walk of Fame because he does not have one, surprisingly. Or you could just donate your $50,000 to me and I'll put it to good use. On the first day of shooting, he suggested Young Frankenstein to Mel Brooks. He's the one who kind of came up with that. Some of his movies are The Producers, where he played Leo, Young Frankenstein, which he played the main character, Willy Wonka, and The Frisco Kid, which if you haven't seen that one, it's pretty funny. Targent, who was played by Slim Pickens, that's obviously a stage name. I can't think of anybody who would name their kid that. He was born June 29th, 1990, and he was named Louis Burt Lindy, Lindy, or however you pronounce it, Jr., and he died December 8th, 1983 from pneumonia after brain surgery. He was actually, his stage name comes from the rodeo circuit, where he was a veteran, and he actually started at 13 years old as a clown and performer. In the 50s, he moved to Hollywood, and the first film he was in was Rocky Mountain, which came out that same year. He was also in Hee Haw, The Outlaws, The Boy from Oklahoma, Major Dundee, and Stagecoach. And Stagecoach was the 66 version, not one of the newer ones or later ones. Headley Lamarr, which was played by Harvey Korman, he was born February 15th, 1927, and died May 29th, 2008. And that was from complications from a rupture of an abnormal aorta aneurysm. One of the things about being an actor is it's really hard to make a break. That's the only reason why I haven't went into doing theater that much. He tried out for Broadway and nightclubs, but had to work as a cashier until he moved to Hollywood. He is the only one to have worked in all three Flintstones. He did 10 seasons of the Carol Burnett Show, and Bud and Lou, which was based off of Ab and Costello. He played in that. He also did 2 more Mel Brooks movies, which was High Anxiety and History of the World Part 1. Mongo was played by a football star named Alex Kars. He was born July 15th, 1935, and died October 10th, 2012 from kidney failure and other health complications. The 2 football teams he played for was the Detroit Lions, and when he was in college, he played for the Iowa Hawkeyes and was a part of their 56 Rose Bowl champion team. He's in the Hall of Fame, Football Hall of Fame, and a lot of people believe he punched a real horse. He did not punch a real horse. He thought it was hilarious. I have a quote there where he's talking about it. But he basically thought it was hilarious, but didn't want to do it. So it didn't happen the way they showed it in the movie. He played also in Victoria, Porky's, and Centennial. Lilly Von Schupp was played by Madeline Kahn. She was born September 29th, 1942. Her last name she actually changed from Wolfson, and she died December 3rd, 1999 from ovarian cancer. She got a drama scholarship to Hofstra University and was trained as an opera singer, so she does know how to sing. She also has a degree in speech therapy. She did some Broadway and off-Broadway shows. And they started picking up after she changed her last name. New Faces was one of the first, followed by Pomeranian. And she also was in Young Frankenstein and History of the World Part 1 and High Anxiety. She did Paper Moon, which is where Mel Brooks actually wanted her to be, actually saw her for the first time. And she did Bug's Life, and I have 2 others there. And the quote I have for her is how she feels about Mel Brooks and the reason why she calls him a dirty uncle. I have later in here. So I'll get to why she feels he is a dirty uncle. Lionel Burton, or Lionel, he was played by Burton Gullum, and he's still alive. He was born August 9th, 1938. Before working in film, he was actually a firefighter for 14 years with the Dallas Fire Department, which was Engine 39. He saw an ad for extras, and that was Paper Moon that he saw the extras for. He ended up getting a role because they thought he was so good as the desk clerk called Floyd. And when Mel Brooks saw this, he said, I want that guy in my film. The quote that I have here, he's talking about how basically during the movie they could not stop laughing. And Mel Brooks had to cut a deal with them. He was in Back to the Future Part 3 and Honeymoon in Vegas. Some of the trivia I have is originally Mel Brooks wanted Richard Pryor to play Bart. He said he couldn't, but would help find an actor, and that's when they got Cleveland Little. And both of them wanted him because he was laid back and took time with the jokes. And if you click the picture that I have on here, it takes you to the article for this one. His Rolling Stones article or interview. According to him, Mel Brooks, the studio never knew what he was doing until the first shooting or first screening, and they wanted to trash the whole movie. They said, how much did we spend? He said $2.5 million. They said, throw it in the trash. And so he said, okay. And he was willing to cut things. He cut one scene out, which was when they were in the dark room And Lily starts making all those comments about stereotypes. And Bart says, "You're sucking on my arm." Originally, it did have a couple different titles, Tex X, Black Bart, and finally they came up with the idea of Blazing Saddles for the name. Gene Wilder wasn't originally the Waco Kid. The first actor was Gig Young, and he apparently started throwing up after they hung him upside down from drinking. And in the same interview, apparently, according to Mel Brooks, he was in tears calling Gene Wilder and asked him basically to come in. And by Monday, they started shooting all over. Shooting. The campfire scene. It was one of the first of its kind. Usually there's no jokes. Usually there's a joke leading up to something like that. But in this case, there wasn't. It was just to introduce Mongo. And it was actually based off of the campfire scenes in other Western movies where they usually are sitting around eating beans and drinking black coffee. They made the fart noises with soap and basically armpits. Then I have the reason why Madeline Kahn felt that he was a dirty uncle. Mel Brooks was a dirty uncle. Apparently, when she went to audition, she almost walked out due to him. And that was because he told her he loved her work, but he needed to see her legs and asked her to raise her skirt. And she thought it was one of those kinds of auditions. And he had to basically beg her to kind of stay and explain, no, this is what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to accomplish this scene from another Western. The fourth wall, it gets broken a lot, figuratively and literally. And you usually don't see that in movies. The scene where they talk about him, Headley Lamarr getting sued actually did happen. The actress, Headley Lamarr, had sued Mel Brooks due to the character. And this wasn't the only character named after an actor or artist. The governor was actually named after a 19th century flagellant artist. If you ever seen Spaceballs, you'll know where the idea of using this using names from, or having everybody named after one thing. In this case, it was Johnson. Everybody in town, their last name is Johnson, and you only see that in one scene. According to the American Film Institute, Barack Obama did use a fake ID when he was 10 to watch it, to watch Blazing Saddles. And I just picked out a few scenes that I either found out about earlier or that I thought were interesting, like the quicksand scene where they're trying to save the trolley. Where he goes, where Bart finally goes to Rockridge and they welcome him. The Wanko Kid is the one that I touched on about Gene Wilder, and the Bean Fest is obviously the farting scene. And then the fourth wall that gets broken is when they say, "I work for Mel Brooks." So I will open up the floor and see what you guys liked about the movie.
Well, I really like the movie. I'm kind of this kind of comedy. I like just witty, kind of silly, stupid stuff. Mel Brooks is just amazing for that. I really enjoyed some of a lot of the things that you put in your paper because there's a lot of things there I didn't know. And I love Mel Brooks's movies altogether. Young Frankenstein may be my favorite as far as his movies. I was wondering something about when Headley Lamarr, I noticed that they would always pronounce his name wrong in the film, and he would correct them. He would correct them, Headley. And I wonder if that had something to do with one of your statements here where Mel Brooks got sued because of that name. I wonder if maybe they added that in there for maybe a little joke between the cast or something. I don't know.
Did Mel Brooks have a beef with Lamar? I'm curious about that now. If you guys know the actress Hedy Lamarr, right? She was a famous golden era actress. She actually invented like what Wi-Fi too. She was a scientist as well as a actress. I don't know what I'd have to read. That's interesting. I don't know why that they would riff on her for.
I think it's something to do with the fact that she sued and they had to settle out of court. Because they even mention it in the film when they finally say what year it is. Basically, you can go off and sue her because it's 1878, I believe it was, or something like that. So I'm betting that's it.
Something else I was intrigued about this movie. There's all kinds of actors, those character actors in this movie that pop up, and you like when they were in this one scene where they're having a town meeting and one guy pops up and another guy pops up and another lady pops up, and these are all familiar people that we may not know their names, right, to begin with, but they're familiar to us. And I believe that added a whole lot to the movie, just seeing those character actors that are familiar. I thought that was wisely placed in the movie.
Yeah, the guy who plays the preacher, like I think I've seen him and stuff before, like Little House on the Prairie or something like that, probably. Yeah. The guy who plays the town drunk, I've seen him and stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff before.
Mr. Johnson, he's seen throughout, and I thought that was another thing that was intriguing. Howard Johnson at that time was, those motels were all over the place, and Howard Johnson had a string of ice cream and shops, and they're not so much, you don't see them as much as you used to, but back in this day, they were everywhere. So perhaps, who knows? Howard Johnson could have given some funding for the film. Who knows? But I thought that was pretty intriguing too.
Other general thoughts on Blazing Saddles from the rest of you?
It was a very clever movie. Just in general, a lot of clever jokes. And I saw how a lot of them were funny, and I recognized them as funny, but I just couldn't laugh in any of them. I know they're hilarious. Like, I even find them funny. It's just, I didn't laugh. I could even show you the one scene I laughed at, and it's so stupid that this is the scene that I laughed in. It's the scene at the end where Gene Wilder's character is about to shoot, and the Reverend gets up, and there's this happening.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why, but that just struck me so funny that it just caught me off guard, where he's just like yelling, and they're just like, you know what, just shut up, shut up. general, like, I don't know. That was, for some stupid reason, that throwaway joke is the only joke I laughed at in this entire movie.
Do you not the offensive jokes? Did that throw you off?
I didn't. Those were one of the ones that I thought were pretty clever because it was like right after they were making fun of, like the ones that I caught at least. Right after they made the offensive joke, the people who made the joke were immediately showed to be the idiot. So like I was like, that's funny. I like that. So it's clever. Just I didn't laugh. I don't know. I'm much better with comedy series instead of movies. I can enjoy 10 episodes of The Office, but I can't enjoy just a single comedy unless I really, really dig it.
Okay, so I think I agree with you there, Corey. Like I've watched God knows how many sitcoms, right? But as far as like a full comedy film, I'm personally not as big on as something like Seinfeld or something like that. Regan, you wanted to chime in here? What do you think of this?
I didn't really like the movie. like for me to go in expecting a Western, like I don't know. I didn't like the humor. And not the jokes themselves, but like the comedic scenes in it. Just like the fake town and stuff. I was like, well, that's dumb. It just didn't sit well with me, I guess. I think this is more like drama than I feel like it was a Western. Like The Searchers. The Searchers is a good Western. That's what I wrote about too. And these two like are so different in that way.
One of the Westerns we watched in this class, this movie's plot rips from. You guys know the one? This movie's plot about the railroad moving in. Yeah, this movie's a comedy version of Once Upon a Time in the West, right? With the railroad moving to town, right? Well, let's or go ahead,
I think
Bill.
there's I think there's a lot of different kind of comedy. I'm like Corey, I can watch a entire movie that's comedy. I may chuckle and enjoy that. But to laugh hysterically, no. Now there are movies that I have laughed hysterically at. The first time that I watched The Dream Team, I just practically would have to go back and rewind it because it just hit me funny. Sometimes movies like this, if you enjoy anything like this, they're movies that you really don't have to think about. You're not trying to change the plot or think about what's going to happen. You're just, the scene where he hits the horse. Now, that's a funny scene. Now, I didn't laugh out loud at it. I just chuckled. So I think that sometimes we expect to maybe laugh out loud at every comedy. I don't believe unless you're like Young Frankenstein, there's several parts in it that you may laugh, but normally it's that chuckle thing because it's this silly, almost slapstick kind of comedy. And so I think there's a lot of different categories of comedy, and they all hit us a different way. For me, I'm a comedy guy all the way. I love it. Seinfeld, I can watch episode after episode and laugh every time I watch it. Kramer, people with those abilities to move and do crazy things with their body is hilarious to me. But I understand that, and I'm seeing all of us having a different perspective on the comedy here. So I think that's not always bad. Sometimes that's good.
This movie we probably should talk about the racial stuff in it. That's Kirsten's first discussion question too on her handout. So I just want to say a couple more things about the film. Of course, this movie came out in '74, and most historians of the Western genre consider this movie to be the death blow to the Western genre, right? Remember earlier in the class when we covered Westerns, I said after the early 70s, there weren't a whole lot of Westerns up until the 90s, right? So for about a 20-year period, Western genre faded in popularity. And this movie made the Western genre look so ridiculous, right? Just like this movie, I like to call this sort of a satire, but it's also a deconstructive movie. It deconstructs the conventions of the whole Western genre, makes them look silly and ridiculous, right? It suggests, like in 19th century America, there was this. Of course, remember the Western genre is a popular genre, right? It was a genre that celebrates America's nationalism, right? Our hardiness and all that stuff. Well, this movie showcases, hey, a lot of these people in the 1800s were racist, right? Who lived in these small towns. Like it goes way beyond that, like the gunslinger trope with Gene Wilder's character, right? It deconstructs that. Like I really love the joke about when he's quick drawing and then you don't even see the gun, right? That's a pretty good trope that they deconstruct. I love the line where they says we'll head him off at the pass, and Headley Lamarr says, "I hate that cliche." Right? That's a that. So this movie just kind of sort of destroys and blows up the whole Western genre. It makes it look kind of silly. And the Searchers and Once Upon a Time in the West. Right? You can those are the two classic Westerns we watched. You can even kind of see from those examples how this movie kind of picks apart a lot of those conventions and reduces them to absurdity. That's what Mel Brooks does. He reduces something serious, like Kirsten said, to absurdity. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that as far as other maybe tropes of the Western that he picks apart here. I talked about the gunslinger, right?
Yeah, he does that in not only the Westerns, but like Frankenstein. I mean, the movie Frankenstein, I think it was Boris Karloff. I don't know, it was in the 40s or whatever, was, it was a really serious horror movie. I mean, but when you get it to young Frankenstein, it totally makes fun of it. So, and yeah, the Western part here, I thought that was one thing that was intriguing, is when we just came out of the dark films, where it was dark and it was, and now all of a sudden we get into this, we're seeing bright pictures of the planes like we did earlier in our movies. But I can see where this movie could have really been detrimental to the serious Western movies of the day, because it really makes fun of them.
I saw a trivia bit that said he offered a part to John Wayne. John Wayne said it was too vulgar for him, but he would be the first in line to see it at the movies. So
The only one that sticks out of my head is the one that you mentioned, which is a gunslinger trope. That was another one that I saw and I was like, that's genuinely hilarious. I'm not laughing, but I love it. Please do more of that.
Right.
There's the scene where Mel Brooks is the Indian chief, and he goes to their wagon and he lets them go. And then he says, he makes a slur remark, they're darker than we are. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how he got away with this movie, to be honest.
He actually talked to Richard Parr on that. He had concerns about the N-word and quite a few other things. Apparently, he was like, oh, well, a bad guy would say it. And he went, it basically went off from there.
Yeah, I will.
Sorry. I was just gonna say the only like exposure I ever had to Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder, especially outside of Willy Wonka, is a small video I seen on YouTube at the end of a movie called The Producers, and it's a musical titled "Springtime for Hitler," and it's hilarious and it's catchy and it's very dark humored. So that's something that Mel Brooks is apparently very, very good at, is taking something that's generally considered evil and just making it the butt of the joke.
Yeah, Mel Brooks was Jewish, right? So actually, during that Indian scene, he's speaking Yiddish as an Indian, which is kind of, which that's funny, right? Yeah, this movie is notoriously difficult to teach. Like when I taught this class, I taught a class on westerns at WVU once. Like the day that I went in to teach that class, like I thought the students were coming in, they were ready to rip my head off for assigning it. Like, how dare you assign this racist movie? Right? I'm just like, they say the N-word so much. Right? I'm just like, well, think about it, right? How is the N-word being used in the movie? Right? Of course, by modern standards, right, it's the view is to never use the word, right? But it's always good to sort of historicize the word and think about it, how it is used when it is used in certain films.
Well, I think that it makes me, again, not want to use the word. I mean, I was raised, I think I've told the class before that I was raised in a community where it was 80% black and 20% white. Now, and I will say this, that I don't know that I've ever said the word. I don't think that I have, even in jest and anything. But my buddies would call each other that. So there's something about that word. And he brings out, that every time you see a black, they use that word. So I think it's interesting. Not only was it the blacks, but I think that I made a note and I lost my note, but I believe that there was a lot of racism, not just against the blacks, but the Jews also. One place someone says, I can't remember who said it, said, well, that's too Jewish for me. And so, and then, Mel Brooks being Jewish, he almost is making light of the, and in one place it's mentioned that it's a bunch of white people. I mean, sometimes, if I was black, I probably wouldn't say this. But sometimes, we look at it so seriously that I think it hinders us in communicating. But that's another topic. But Mel Brooks is not afraid to do this in the 70s. I doubt he'd get away with it today.
The thing that I noticed right away when I started the movie is the first time I heard the N-word being said. What happens next is the white guys are asking the black guys to sing a song, an old N-word song or whatever he said. And honestly, I think you're supposed to think of like wade in the water and all those types. And they just sing this like actually really beautiful a cappella song. And they're like, no, you're supposed to do this. And then they end up singing the stupid songs, and then they're like got their hands in the air and somebody ends up shooting something. And like that's what I've said earlier about like the people who say the N word and are racist automatically are the ones who literally in the very next sentence will make themselves out to be the idiots. And that's honestly, that's what I liked about it, is just it was like, okay, that was funny, but you flipped it on its head and you made sure that like this isn't something that we're supposed to like uh agree with, or what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever the word is. Yeah.
I tell you, Corey, you just nailed, to me, you nailed that. I mean, because I'm looking at it as I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking, at first they're making fun of Bart. He's a prisoner and all this, but he's much smarter than the rest of the white people. I mean, he ends up being a whole lot smarter than they are, and he makes total idiots out of them. So if you look at it from that perspective, um, justice was accomplished, because he certainly was the man with the brains, not all these other people. That was cool.
You could almost even flip it completely in the other direction and say that it's being anti-white, because it seems like literally every idiot in this movie is the white guy. It seems like the only two intelligent people are Gene Wilder's character and Bart.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, to build
Yeah,
on
that
what
was my thought on it.
I was going to say, to build on what you said, Corey. The other scene when he first goes into the town and they were expecting this John Wayne to show up and they get him right. Like that's when they say the N word there, right? That after that, that's when he uses that voice and acts like he's going to shoot himself, and they're like, "Oh no!" Right? So that's another case of when they say it, they're meant to look like idiots.
They even put their guns down.
Yeah.
They put their guns down, and he's got this other voice going on, and he just totally outwits them, totally. And he does it all the way across the street till he walks in his office, and there they stand. So, yeah, that was a good one too.
I love when the old lady bakes him a pie, but then she's like, "Don't tell anybody I did that." Right? That's another good one. Kirsten, what other discussion questions you got for us here? Pull up your handout here.
I have one about the Western movies, and comparing them to Blazing Saddles. And I was asking, did it kill the Western genre, or was it just a nail in the coffin? I also have one about Mongo and film techniques, the fourth wall and how it gets broken, and then other characters that stick out. Because especially towards the end, that fourth wall is pretty much gone.
Okay, so let's go with that question. Regan, you said earlier in the class that took you off guard, like the fake town, and then they brawl onto a different movie set and all this stuff, right? Tell me what your thoughts were on that.
Well, the fact of them breaking the fourth wall, I thought actually added to the movie, like it instead of taking away, because I feel like it justified the humor more. Not that I found it funny. Like I said, I didn't really like it, but I felt like it justified it as like, okay, this is not serious. You're not supposed to take this serious. This is supposed to be funny. That's how I looked at it. Like, it added to it and it kind of gave it more definition, I feel like.
I felt the same way. I seen it, and I was thinking about it too when I was gonna answer my discussion, and I was thinking like I didn't really like it at the end, even though I generally do find fourth wall break moments funny. They just, once it gets to a certain point, it just tends to drag for me, and it tends to be more of a letdown than anything. But like when you look at it on paper and you have this comedy that either ends in a regular Western movie fashion, or you have it with this big scene at the end where they go onto 3 different movie sets and they go in and they watch the movie that they're in. Like, you'd be stupid not to pick that ending. Like, you'd be really stupid not to pick that. So like, even though I didn't find it funny, it worked, and it was what they were supposed to do, honestly.
Exactly. That's exactly what I think. You said it much better than I did.
I love we still have the conventional Western ending too, right? The driving off and the sunset ending. He drives in a car instead, which is in a convertible, which is pretty funny. This is humor that tickles the mind.
I've always
right?
liked
Go ahead, Kirsten.
I was just saying I've always liked that part because it kind of makes fun of theater. Because even in his Spaceballs, he does the stunt doubles. And with theater and fake set, it's kind of expected something to happen to that set. And so I was like, okay, just gotta wait for something to happen. And with how close some of these studios were when filming a movie, it always has been something that I kind of liked about that particular ending.
Yeah,
Um,
I like the scene where they're doing the musical or something, and then they crash in on that. Like, that director is trying to like do the dance and stuff, right? Yeah, so I've always thought that was a funny scene too. I completely disagree with all of you. I think this is one of the funniest movies ever made. I think all of you are off the mark here, right? But this just goes to show you that humor is subjective.
See, I was coming into this preparing to be the odd man out, because literally, while I watch these movies on YouTube, and in the comments, everybody's like, "This is the best comedy ever," and I'm like, "Man, I'm not feeling this. Why am I not feeling?" Literally, everybody loves this movie, and I'm just not feeling it.
Well, I have to.
yeah, I actually, when I saw the.
Go ahead,
Go
Kirsten.
ahead, Bill.
No, you go ahead, hon.
No, you can go ahead.
Well, I was just going to
I was
say.
just going to say when I saw them. Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say this, that I find everything funny. I mean, anything that relates to comedy, I love it, and I love this movie. It wasn't the movie that, like I said earlier, would make me explode into laughter. But I chuckled the whole time because I was seeing all kinds of things. Harvey Korman, for instance, who is Headley Lamarr. This is a man that has made his living on overacting on purpose. And he's so funny, like on the Carol Burnett show. She once said about Harvey Korman that he was the greatest actor she ever worked with. Why? Well, it's slapstick. It's something that, you just you get it and you go and you take off with it. So Harvey Korman attached with Gene Wilder. I mean, really, these are real comedians. Gene Wilder is hilarious to me. So I find the movie very funny. At times I've found myself, I think really the use of the N-word bothered me. I have to say that now it bothered me. Perhaps the first time I watched it 30 some years ago didn't bother me. I just kind of understood what the movie was saying. But now in the times that we're living, when everybody is tremendously sensitive over it, not just black people, but white people alike, I think it did something for my outward laugh. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever, but I still find the movie funny. Mel Brooks to me is a total idiot, and that I mean that in a good way, because that's what he intends to do to the movie. And I think for this kind of movie, there's not a better director to do these types of films.
If it's any
I
consolation,
was
I'm
going to say
probably
when
not.
You go ahead, Kirsten. You go ahead.
I was just going to say the reason I chose this film was I saw Mel Brooks and went for it because he's always been funny in my eye. And I've seen Spaceballs since I was little, and I've seen pretty much the producers and this one so many times. I figured go ahead and do it.
Is the producers good? Because I literally only know that one scene in the movie. I literally only know the one scene at the musical, thinking is the end. Is it actually good? Because I'm hoping it's really good.
So the producers is a musical. The Springtime for Hitler actually happens earlier. And it's about these two con men, Leo, which is Gene Wilder, and I forget what Zero's character was named. It has I think that's the actor, Zero Monster, I can't pronounce his last name, but it has him as the director, who they start this con of let's make a flop. And then we can like have all this money. Well, I'm trying very hard not to give away the end.
That's okay.
They end up
I
finding, yeah, it's funny.
Good deal. Good deal.
Let's just say it's unexpected.
Once we get done with these movies, because no offense, Dr. Yeager, I'm suffering from movie fatigue. Once we get through the semester, probably the first movie I'm going to watch for fun is going to be The Producers then.
Yeah, this is the spring semester. Everybody feels fatigue close to the end. So it's the fun of the spring semester.
One thing that we may have not talked about that I'd like to bring up is that the westerns, the old westerns, when they started, we had to remember people like Steve Nicks and Gene Autry, the singing cowboys, that maybe a lot of people's not familiar with their work. Cowboy Copas, those people, they were singing cowboys. And I noticed this movie starts out with this song, and the song is relative to the rest of the movie. I thought that was a little intriguing, in that they almost he almost as a director, he lures you in to thinking at the beginning you're going to get into just a regular Western movie. And then after he gets you involved in that, and you hear that music and the lyrics are good and the music is Westerny. So there you are getting ready to go into a normal Western movie. And then he really just knocks your feet totally out from under you. And I think that's genius to me, because he used some of the old people that would have watched this in the 70s would have been familiar, I think, with some of those old Westerns of yesteryear. So I believe that was I believe he did that on purpose, starting this out with some music like he did.
Kirsten mentioned one of the actors is from that show Hee Haw. That's what that show Hee Haw was. It's just like country, like Western music. Right.
Slim Pickens or Slim.
Yeah, Slim Pickens.
Yeah, he was in a lot of those old John Wayne movies, the Gene Autry's even back in those days. So yeah, yes, she did mention that.
And Mel Brooks actually didn't tell the guy who sung the song that it was for comedy. He actually never did, because he was like, well, if I do, then he's going to change it. And he didn't want it changed. So
that's a good point. That is a good point.
I love when it shows the town in it and it has like a narration. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, now.
It looked like I cut out for a second. I love when it was showing the town and it still had that same songy narration. And it's just describing the town and their situation and what's going to happen. And then it goes inside the church and everybody's singing this song. And that's just, it's another one of those movies where it's like, I wish I liked this movie because that's hilarious.
Yeah, we went straight from horror films to comedies to talk about a complete change of pace here, right?
I was totally relaxed watching this movie though. After watching the horror movies, I was a little bit stiff watching them, a little bit, I don't know if afraid's the right word, but tense perhaps. But I was totally relaxed. I just kind of watched this movie and kind of didn't analyze it too much. Just kind of enjoyed, what Brooks was going to bring to us.
Yeah, I'll say a couple more words here. This movie is one of the most important comedies of all time. So even if it's not quite your thing, it is very important to film history. I mean, just think about how much it completely destroyed a genre, right? After this movie, people stopped going to Westerns. There were still Westerns, but none of them made any money. It forced Westerns to change the formula up. Like in the late 70s, you had Clint Eastwood doing the Dirty Harry films, right? Which was kind of like a Western noir sort of blending. That was fresh content, right? So these old John Wayne style Westerns stopped after this. The Western had to get edgier in a way, right? Only in the late 80s and early 90s, like you had some good movies in the 80s, like you had Clint Eastwood doing like Pale Rider, and there was Silverado in the 80s. But it wasn't until the early 90s when the Western finally did make a comeback. And even today, when you think about it, how many Westerns do you see? That come out? Not a whole lot. So it is very important from that aspect. Again, this movie is a movie that came out at the right time. This is the Vietnam era, right? 74, right? How many movies from like 1973 or 74 we watched in this class already? Let's think about it. Talk about a golden era of movies, like the early 70s there. So yeah, it's very important from an appreciation angle, just how much damage it did, right? Even to think about how much damage did this movie do to Hollywood, right? Just because all these movies that were big money makers suddenly stopped being money makers. I'm not saying that it's Blazing Saddles' entire fault for that, right? But it almost feels like the death nail in the coffin for the Western genre, right? To go off what Kirsten's question was earlier. Another point I want, or go ahead, Bill.
Well, it just makes me really appreciate a guy like Clint Eastwood. I mean, you you watch that and it did. I had never thought of that till you told us that I think a couple of weeks ago about how it really put a hurt on Westerns. You can't think hardly of anyone else that did a Western other than Clint Eastwood going through that period of time. Now, later on, he'll rebound. He'll have Unforgiven, and he'll have some more that are just tremendous movies. But when he went into that dirty, I never thought about why he did that, went into the Dirty Harry movies. But that makes total sense to me now. The Westerns weren't going to click at the box office, but certainly Dirty Harry did, and some of those movies. That's intriguing to me. That's really something. But it makes me too appreciate a guy like Clint Eastwood and what a awesome director, actor, producer that he is. He's really brilliant.
Yeah, Unforgiven is a very moody film. If you guys ever want like a very moody film, like it's often on my syllabus for this class, but like it calls the question these, just like Blazing Saddles, it calls into question the tropes of the Western genre, right? But it's much more serious in how it does it than this. I just want to say one other thing too about the racial stuff in the film. This is a tricky issue. I mean, it's easy for us, like this class is full of white people, right? It's easy for us as a class to discuss that kind of stuff. But I'll just say this for my profession, at least. I teach my specialty in grad school is 1800s American literature. That's what my doctorate is in, 1800s American literature. So like think about like books, like Huck Finn is a very controversial book these days. I don't know if you guys have ever read it, by Mark Twain, right? Huckleberry Finn. But in Huck Finn, they also say that word a lot in the book. But it's used in a very it's used in a way that's critical of racist people too, just like how Blazing Saddles is. But that book has caused extreme controversies. Like you have boards of education who ban the book from being taught in like K to 12. So you have new editions of the book coming out that like substitute. It's like you have a Control F where you substitute that word for another word, right? So again, it's a case of, right, what's more important? Should we have historical authenticity here, right? Or is the censorship damaging almost, right? Does the censorship ruin the art? Right? That's a tough question for me to handle, but I'll say this, the way that when I teach Huckleberry Finn, just like how when I teach this film, like I don't skirt over the word, right? I'm just like, you kind of have to see the ugliness to appreciate the humor, because Huck Finn's a humorous book too. That's just my opinion. Several people disagree. Like I had a conversation once with a colleague of mine at WVU who was a African American person. She thought I was terrible for the way that I approached Huck Finn. We had a conversation about it. Like she's like, so I don't know if she saw it as terrible, but like I got the impression that she did at least, right? But
What if you take a movie like To Kill a Mockingbird? I mean, that is historically justified. We look at that movie, which is, by the way, one of my two favorite movies of all time. And I look at that movie and I think, wow, to know the injustice that went on in 1954, that would be a credit, I would think, to historical realism. I would think that if I was of color, I would want to know the truth about the historical matters in order to be prepared for today. I think when we dodge the subject, we're doing the people of color a disservice. So as time goes on, they may perhaps be doing themselves a disservice because, it's eye-opening. You watch To Kill a Mockingbird and watch that gentleman be guilty of something he did not do, and the white people go free. That really happened. That kind of stuff really went on. So that's where the film becomes art. And I don't think that we need to take that out of it.
yeah, it's difficult. Like, let's say we had this class. Let's say we had one black student in the class. Like, let's say we were all in the classroom together. And whenever we're talking about this stuff, what do people naturally do? Like, they turn around and look at the one black person, right, to see what they think. Right. So it is difficult. Like, even the classroom dynamics and stuff, it is difficult. Difficult thing to manage. So it's something that I put a lot of thought into before I do teach material like this. But I'm of the mindset, like, you can't skirt over it, right? You have to acknowledge it. I think that the K-12 system, especially today, is they like to skirt over stuff more than acknowledge stuff for the most part. So yeah, good discussion. Right? This movie wasn't all your guys' cup of tea, but I think we all came out of it appreciating it a little more. So our movies for next week, next Tuesday is 4/20. So we're watching the classic pothead film, The Big Lebowski. Right. So that's our comedy for next week. The Coen Brothers. So those of you who like No Country for Old Men, right, you'll get to see their comedy side. And they have a very dark, intellectual sort of comedy, more compared to this type of slapstick that we get here. And then The Breakfast Club is next week as well on Thursday. That's a comedy, but it's also a very serious drama too. So, like, I'll be interested to see what you guys have to think about that one if you've never seen it.
Did we switch Steel Magnolias with Big Lebowski?
Yeah, the schedule, the upcoming, this is the right schedule is on the blackboard announcements.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
so we got Big Lebowski and Breakfast Club, and then the Tuesday after that, Still Magnolias.
I got it. Here's my note. Thanks.
Well, and Nicole will be presenting on Still Magnolias. That's also a comedy. It's very serious drama too. So, like, you guys are gonna get a lot of different flavors of comedy over the next couple of classes, I think.
If it's any consolation for not liking this one, for some reason I feel like The Big Lebowski is gonna hit for me. I know one scene in particular. If it's the right scene, it's I think all I have to quote is, "Do you see what happens, Larry?" If that's the scene in The Big Lebowski.
Yep.
The first time I ever watched that scene, I laughed my head off. So I'm hoping that that's kind of the vibe of the movie.
It is. That's the vibe of the movie. Bill, I was going to tell you too. You said Kill a Mockingbird is one of your favorite movies. They're actually showing it in the cinema out here in Beckley right now.
Really?
Yeah, so if you want to go see it in the cinema, they're showing it up through the end of the weekend. So if you want to take a little road trip,
Yes.
it's
Yeah, it is
rare.
one of my-
It's rare you get to see one of your favorite movies in the cinema. So it is
So
showing.
true. You know where that's being shown at? What's
Yeah,
it called?
The Marquee Cinema in Beckley.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where they're showing it. They're showing it out here because I know that because I'm going to go watch it in the movies this weekend. So if you want to take a little trip, there you go.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys. So until next time, take care. We'll see you next week.
Good job, Kirsten.
Very good job. Very good job.
Job.
Thank you.